Ferrari may have just hidden one of the biggest crises of the entire season behind Lewis Hamilton's podium celebration. Because while the world focused on Hamilton finishing second in Canada, something inside the Ferrari garage was quietly falling apart. Charles Leclerc sounded devastated. Not frustrated, devastated. At one point after the race, Leclerc admitted he felt like he was going to crash at almost every corner because the SF-26 never entered the correct operating window. No tire confidence, no brake feeling, no trust in the car. And this is Charles Leclerc we are talking about, one of the fastest natural drivers on the entire grid. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton looked completely transformed. Second place finish, an incredible late battle against Max Verstappen, and the happiest Hamilton has sounded since joining Ferrari. That contrast is now creating massive tension inside Maranello, because when one elite driver suddenly unlocks the car, while the other feels completely disconnected from it, teams start fearing something much deeper than setup problems, especially under the brutal new 2026 regulations. And then Hamilton accidentally exposed the detail Ferrari desperately hoped nobody would focus on. Even after finishing on the podium, he admitted Ferrari still cannot match Mercedes in straight-line speed. That sentence changed everything. Because according to reports after Canada, Ferrari may already be losing between 22 and 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes. That is catastrophic in modern Formula One. And now the FIA is closely monitoring Ferrari's position through the ADUO development system, the mechanism designed to help manufacturers falling behind in engine performance. Think about how humiliating that sounds. Ferrari, the most iconic engine manufacturer in Formula One history, potentially needing technical recovery support just to stay competitive. But the terrifying part is this. Hamilton's podium may have completely masked the real problem. Because after Canada, Ferrari suddenly looks like a team, with one driver adapting to the SF-26, and another driver slowly losing trust in it entirely. From the very beginning of the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, Ferrari already looked emotionally divided. And the scary part is that almost nobody noticed it at first. Because on one side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton finally looked comfortable inside the SF-26. Not just fast, comfortable. That difference matters enormously in Formula One. Hamilton had spent most of the season searching for confidence in the car, searching for balance, searching for a setup that actually matched his driving style. But suddenly in Montreal, something changed. The braking looked smoother, the tire management looked cleaner, and during the final stint against Max Verstappen, Hamilton drove with the confidence of someone who finally understood the car underneath him. That is why his radio messages after overtaking Verstappen sounded so emotional. For the first time since joining Ferrari, Hamilton genuinely felt connected to the project. After the race, he even called Canada the happiest weekend of his Ferrari career so far. That sentence sounded positive on the surface, but underneath it, another story was developing. Because while Hamilton finally found confidence, Charles Leclerc was experiencing the exact opposite emotionally. And the warning signs started almost immediately. Leclerc admitted after the race that the problems began during the very first practice session and never disappeared for the rest of the weekend. The tires refused to enter the correct operating window. The brakes never felt predictable. The rear balance constantly shifted underneath him. Imagine trying to walk across a moving floor while wearing shoes with no grip. That is basically what Leclerc was describing. Every corner felt unstable. Every braking zone felt risky. And eventually, the emotional frustration started becoming visible over the radio and in interviews after the race. Leclerc openly admitted he felt like he was going to crash at almost every corner because the car never gave him confidence for a single lap. That statement should terrify Ferrari, because drivers at this level rely almost entirely on instinct. When instinct disappears, hesitation appears. And in Formula One, hesitation destroys lap time immediately. That is why Canada suddenly exposed something deeply uncomfortable about the SF-26. The car may only work properly inside an extremely narrow operating window. For Hamilton, Ferrari finally found that window in Montreal. For Leclerc, the car never entered it at all. That difference creates enormous pressure inside team, because now Ferrari faces a dangerous possibility moving forward. What if the current development direction naturally fits Hamilton's driving style more than Leclerc's? That question changes everything emotionally inside the garage, especially because Ferrari still does not fully understand the inconsistency themselves. Frederic Vasseur admitted after the race that the team needs to understand why the same car behaves so differently for both drivers on the same weekends. That sounds technical, but in reality, it is deeply worrying, because top Formula One teams usually understand their cars with incredible precision by this stage of the season. If Ferrari still cannot predict why one driver feels connected while the other feels completely lost, then the development process itself becomes dangerous. And here's where the story becomes even worse for Ferrari. Even during Hamilton's strongest weekend of the season, the car still looked weak compared to Mercedes on the straights. Hamilton admitted it himself after the race. Ferrari still lacks straight-line speed. And according to reports after Canada, the deficit may already be between 22 and 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes. That is enormous under the new 2026 regulations, because these cars depend heavily on hybrid deployment and electrical efficiency during acceleration zones. Mercedes appears to have mastered that system earlier than everyone else. Ferrari has not. And suddenly, Hamilton's podium no longer feels like proof Ferrari solved its problems. It feels like one extraordinary driver temporarily overcoming problems the SF-26 still fundamentally cannot hide. And this is where Ferrari's situation starts becoming genuinely dangerous internally. Because after Canada, the biggest problem may no longer be raw performance. It may be trust. Trust in the car. Trust in the development direction. And eventually, trust between both sides of the garage itself. Think about the emotional contrast Ferrari left Montreal with. Hamilton sounded optimistic for the first time all season. Leclerc sounded emotionally exhausted. That imbalance changes the atmosphere inside teams incredibly fast, because Formula One garages naturally move toward momentum, toward confidence, toward the driver who currently understands the car best. And after Canada, that driver suddenly looks like Lewis Hamilton. That creates another hidden pressure point Ferrari cannot easily control: development philosophy. Because now the engineers face a brutal dilemma moving forward. Do they continue evolving the SF-26 around the setup direction Hamilton is finally making work? Or do they change direction to help Leclerc recover confidence before the situation gets worse? Neither option feels safe, because if Ferrari follows Hamilton's direction aggressively, Leclerc could become even more disconnected from the car over the next races. But if Ferrari changes direction too much trying to help Leclerc, they risk destroying the progress Hamilton finally discovered. That is the trap Ferrari may now be entering. And the terrifying part is that none of this even solves the team's biggest weakness anyway: straight-line speed. Hamilton admitted it publicly after the race. Ferrari still cannot compete with Mercedes on the straights. That statement carried enormous weight because Hamilton rarely speaks openly about weaknesses unless the issue is impossible to hide internally. And according to reports after Canada, Ferrari may already be losing between 22 and 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes. In modern Formula One, that is massive, especially under the brutal new 2026 regulations where hybrid deployment controls huge parts of acceleration and race pace. Think about two runners leaving the same starting line, except one runner carries a heavy backpack during every sprint. Even if both runners are equally talented, one slowly loses ground every straight. That may now be Ferrari's reality. And this is why the FIA's involvement suddenly became such a huge story after Canada. Because the governing body is now closely monitoring Ferrari's position through the ADUO development system, the exact mechanism designed to help manufacturers that fall behind under the new engine regulations. That sounds helpful on paper. Politically, it is humiliating. This is Ferrari, the most iconic engine manufacturer in Formula One history. And now there is a real possibility the team may need technical recovery support just to stay competitive against Mercedes. That changes how rival teams view Ferrari immediately. But internally, the emotional consequences could become even more dangerous, because Leclerc's confidence now looks fragile. And confidence is everything in Formula One. A confident driver attacks corners instinctively. A doubtful driver hesitates for half a second. At this level, half a second feels enormous. And after Canada, Leclerc no longer sounds like a driver simply frustrated by setup. He sounds like someone questioning the entire feeling of the car underneath him. Meanwhile, Hamilton suddenly sounds emotionally invested in the future of the SF-26 for the first time. That creates a split inside the garage that Ferrari absolutely cannot allow to grow. Especially because history shows what happens when Ferrari loses emotional balance internally. Pressure explodes quickly. Every strategy call becomes political. Every setup direction becomes controversial. Every driver comment becomes national news across Italy, and the championship situation only makes the pressure worse. Mercedes increased the gap massively after Canada. McLaren continues improving. Red Bull remains dangerous. Meanwhile, Ferrari still looks like a team searching for understanding instead of domination. And that may be the most terrifying part of all. Canada was supposed to feel like Ferrari's breakthrough weekend. Instead, it may have exposed that the SF-26 still behaves like a mystery, even to Ferrari itself. And now Ferrari enters the most dangerous phase possible for a Formula One team under pressure. The phase where uncertainty starts becoming emotional. Because after Canada, nobody inside Ferrari seems fully certain what the SF-26 actually needs anymore. Not the drivers, not the engineers, maybe not even the team leadership itself. And that becomes incredibly dangerous once a championship starts slipping away. Think about the contradictions Ferrari left Montreal with. Hamilton delivered the team's best result of the season. Leclerc described the same weekend as one of the worst experiences of his Formula One career. One driver finally trusts the car. The other sounds terrified by it. That kind of split does not happen inside stable projects. It happens when a car behaves unpredictably depending on setup direction, driving style, or tire conditions. And under the new 2026 regulations, those variables became far more extreme. The electrical systems are more aggressive. The tire windows are narrower. The energy deployment systems demand perfect balance every lap, which means small setup differences now create massive emotional differences for drivers. That appears to be exactly what Ferrari is fighting right now. And here's the terrifying part. Ferrari still brought no upgrades to Canada. Nothing. While Mercedes arrived with major improvements and immediately looked dominant. That contrast exposed something Ferrari desperately hoped nobody would focus on. The SF-26 may already be falling behind structurally. Not temporarily, structurally. Because Hamilton's comments after the race confirmed the problem Ferrari cannot hide anymore. The straight-line deficit is real. And according to reports after Montreal, Ferrari may already be losing between 22 and 25 horsepower compared to Mercedes. That kind of gap changes everything strategically. Overtaking becomes harder. Defending becomes harder. Tire management becomes more stressful because drivers spend longer trapped in dirty air. And psychologically, drivers start forcing lap time to compensate for weaknesses the car simply cannot overcome naturally. That may partially explain why Leclerc looked so emotionally exhausted after Canada. Because when drivers lose trust in the balance and simultaneously know the car lacks straight-line performance, every lap starts feeling like survival instead of rhythm. And meanwhile, Hamilton's adaptation may actually be masking how serious Ferrari's problems truly are. That sounds strange at first, but think about it carefully. Hamilton has spent nearly 2 decades adapting to radically different Formula One philosophies. McLaren, Mercedes, different tire generations, different hybrid systems. He may simply be compensating for Ferrari's weaknesses better than expected. That is not the same thing as Ferrari solving the weaknesses themselves. And this is where the situation becomes deeply political inside Maranello. Because if Ferrari now starts building development around Hamilton's feedback more aggressively, Leclerc risks becoming even more disconnected emotionally from the project. But if Ferrari changes direction to recover Leclerc's confidence, they risk slowing the only progress currently visible on track. That internal tension can quietly destroy seasons, especially at Ferrari, where pressure never stays internal for long. Every interview becomes a headline. Every setup decision becomes public debate. Every frustrated radio message becomes national discussion. And now, with the FIA closely monitoring Ferrari through the ADUO development system, the pressure is growing from outside the team as well. Because if Ferrari officially becomes one of the manufacturers needing development assistance under the new regulations, the symbolism would be brutal. Ferrari built its entire Formula One identity around speed and engines. Now suddenly, the team risks becoming known as the giant struggling to understand the modern hybrid era properly. And that emotional pressure changes how everyone inside the garage operates. Engineers become more conservative. Drivers become more frustrated. Every bad session suddenly feels heavier emotionally. That is why Canada may become one of the defining weekends of Ferrari's entire season. Not because Hamilton finished second, but because the weekend exposed 2 terrifying truths at the exact same time. The SF-26 may still be fundamentally flawed, and Ferrari may not fully understand those flaws yet.